Ilia Topuria fought blind for 3 rounds. Both eyes gone. Bones fractured around both eye sockets. Blood tracking down his face in front of the entire world on the biggest stage in the history of mixed martial arts. And he kept going. Until his corner decided he couldn't anymore. That is the full story of what happened at UFC Freedom 250. And the update that just came out is far more serious than anyone initially understood. Let's go back to the beginning. Because the medical reality of what Topuria endured inside that cage at the White House changes how you read every single round of that fight. Topuria has broken his silence. He posted on Instagram Monday afternoon, "The MMA world had been waiting since the ambulance pulled away from the South Lawn before the official decision was even read, and what he wrote was not the defiant bravado of a fighter making excuses. It was raw, honest, and in some ways more unsettling than anything that happened during the fight itself." He told Gaethje directly, "You said you would leave your mark on my face, and you did." And then he revealed the detail that reframes everything. He lost vision in his right eye in the first round. His left eye went by the end of the second round. Round 2. He was fighting effectively blind from that point forward, through rounds 3 and 4, through every exchange, every clinch, every moment where he pressed Gaethje against the cage and tried to survive rather than impose his will. Think about what that means. The man who knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. The man who finished Max Holloway. The man who stopped Charles Oliveira. The most feared striker in the lightweight division, fighting without his most fundamental tool as a fighter, in front of the largest audience in UFC history, on the lawn of the White House, for 3 complete rounds. And his corner was the ones who ended it. Not a referee stoppage mid-round. A corner stoppage between rounds 4 and 5, when the people closest to him decided that his pride was no longer the most important consideration in the room. That detail matters. It matters to Gaethje too, who knows exactly what he's doing when he says, "I made him quit on the stool." In fighter language, having your corner stop the fight is among the most difficult losses to process. You didn't tap. You didn't go unconscious. Someone else decided you were done. Gaethje is framing his victory in the specific language that maximizes its psychological weight. And he's earned the right to frame it any way he wants. Now let's talk about the medical reality. Because the injuries are more serious than the initial post-fight report suggested, and the full picture has only emerged in the days since the ambulance left the arena. Topuria was transported to a Washington, D.C. hospital immediately after the fight, before the official decision was announced inside the Octagon. Dana White spoke at the post-fight press conference in tones that nobody in that room had expected to hear from a man who usually keeps the promotional optimism running at full volume regardless of outcomes. White said directly, "He's busted up. I'm not a doctor, but his eye looked like he probably has a broken orbital." Not a throwaway line. A diagnosis from ringside. The medical examinations confirmed what White suspected and then went further. Topuria suffered non-displaced fractures in both orbital bones. Both. The right eye took the majority of the damage, but neither socket was spared. 2 fractured orbitals. Many people expected 1. The bilateral nature of the injury explains everything. Every moment in the later rounds where the defensive reaction slowed, where punches landed that the earlier Topuria would have slipped cleanly, where the fight that Topuria was supposed to dominate became a survival exercise instead. The good news, and it is genuinely good news in the context of what Topuria's face looked like after round 4, is that the fractures are non-displaced. The bones stayed in alignment. No surgery is required. He was discharged from the hospital after a few hours. His team confirmed he is at home. But the absence of surgery does not mean a quick return. Non-displaced orbital fractures require months of strict rest, regular diagnostic imaging, and a very gradual resumption of physical conditioning. Specialists have prescribed exactly that. And here is the part that combat sports medicine professionals are most concerned about, the detail that the headlines are not fully capturing. Orbital fractures create a vulnerability that does not simply disappear when the bones heal. Once you have broken the orbital bones, the vulnerability follows you into the next fight and the one after that. The bones will heal to their approximate original strength. Approximate. That word is doing significant work in that sentence. Not full original strength. Not guaranteed original strength. Approximate. For a striker who generates power through precise technical contact and whose defensive system depends on reading and reacting to incoming shots with clarity, Fighting with eye socket vulnerability in future bouts is a variable that cannot be dismissed. The mandatory medical suspension is 6 months. The prescribed recovery and gradual return to conditioning could push that timeline considerably further. The realistic assessment from people who follow this professionally is that Topuria will not return to the Octagon in 2026. A 2027 return is the most optimistic scenario built on current medical information. That is an 18-month absence from competition for a fighter who is already on a roughly annual schedule. The lightweight division will not wait. It will not pause. It will not hold the conversation in place while Topuria heals. Because look at what the weight class looks like right now. Justin Gaethje, 37 years old, 9 years in the UFC, 16 fights, 17 bonuses, is the new undisputed lightweight champion. He just delivered the biggest win of his career on the biggest stage the sport has ever produced. And the question that nobody wants to ask but everyone is thinking is whether that stage was also the perfect exit. Whether the man who spent years being written off has now written the final chapter of his own story in the most spectacular possible way and has no interest in following it with anything diminished. Gaethje retiring after the White House fight is not a crazy scenario. It is a realistic one. And if he walks away, the rematch that Topuria is already demanding publicly may never happen. Islam Makhachev is still there. Conor McGregor is fighting Max Holloway at UFC 329, and the lightweight championship is suddenly available to whoever makes the strongest claim. The division that was being organized around Topuria's apparent invincibility is now in a state of complete uncertainty. And the man at the center of that uncertainty is at home with both eyes fractured, following medical instructions, and posting on Instagram about a return that his own doctors cannot put a firm date on. Topuria ended his statement with a promise. He wrote, "I'll heal. I'll rest. And I'll return stronger, wiser, and far more dangerous." That may well be true. The historical record of fighters who have suffered serious injuries and returned to elite performance is not uniformly discouraging. Topuria is 27 years old. He has the physical tools, the technical skills, and the competitive drive to come back and compete at the highest level again. The loss does not define what he is. But it changes the conversation around him completely and irreversibly. He is no longer the unbroken predator. The record that read 17-0 now reads 17-1. The corners have made a call that his pride never would have made. The narrative of inevitable dominance is over. What Topuria wrote about his preparation is the part that has been sitting with people since the post went up. He said he had one of the best camps of his life. That he came in sharp, prepared, and ready. And then he said, "Last night was your night. No excuses." Read that carefully. He is not blaming the camp. He is not blaming the preparation. He is not constructing a narrative in which a different version of events would have produced a different result. He is saying that Gaethje was better on that specific night. That is not a statement most elite fighters make in defeat. It is either genuine humility or the kind of processed honesty that comes from sitting in a hospital room with both eyes fractured after going 3 rounds blind in front of the world. Either way, it is the most honest post-fight statement Topuria has ever made. And it is the one that changes everything about how we understand what happened on the South Lawn of the White House. The journey back starts now. Months of rest. Diagnostic imaging at regular intervals. A gradual return to physical conditioning that the doctors are not yet willing to put a timeline on. A 2027 return, most likely. A lightweight division that will have moved significantly in every direction by the time he is ready to compete again. A rematch that Gaethje has openly questioned the likelihood of, because he sees no obligation to give a shortcut back to the man he just stopped on the biggest night in MMA history. And a fighter who went from unbeatable to broken in 4 rounds and now has to decide who he is on the other side of that. Topuria said he will return stronger, wiser, and more dangerous. The sport will be watching to find out if that is true. Right now, the only fight on his schedule is the one with his own recovery. And that fight has no date, no opponent, and no guaranteed outcome.